Hello everyone, and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is going to be a review of the upcoming Summon Showcase. It's another Gala remix this time around, featuring the return of Gala Laxi with an appearance rate up. She is a Flame Dagger, and she's joined on this showcase by two new permanent pool adventurers, a Water Dagger, Humanoid Mercury, and a Flame Axe, Child Ranzal. So, Child Ranzal and Humanoid Mercury were both featured prominently in the Elementary Escapades event. I love the event, thought it was very fun and playful, so I'm super excited to see their alts make a playable appearance. And Gala Laxi is also a fan favorite who players may have missed out on when she made her debut last summer. All in all, I think these are three very appealing characters, and I think that lots of players are going to want to summon on this showcase. I see Humanoid Mercury as potentially the strongest adventurer on this showcase, with Gala Laxi also quite strong in her own right, and Child Ranzal sort of the biggest toss-up for me. I think that he has some good potential in the future for Sinister Dominion content, but I don't know how much he's needed right now. So my overall take on this showcase is, if you're struggling with Curse of Nihility or Sinister Dominion, or you want to try future-proof yourself and you're willing to expend a little bit of resources on these characters, this could be worth summoning on. And personally, I didn't need a lot of motivation to summon on this, just because I was already interested in having Humanoid Mercury join my collection, because she's a human form of the Great Worms and I love her design. Having said all of that, I actually am considering skipping on this. I don't 100% know if I'm going to summon. I want to wait to see what the next showcase may hold, whether that's young Luis or somebody else. But my issue with the showcase personally is I don't love the amp mechanic, and both Ranzal and Mercury lean into this heavily. And I'm just a little bit worried about the future right now, because I feel like the amp mechanic is a very arbitrary solution to an artificially created problem in the form of Curse of Nihility. I haven't been a Curse of Nihility enemy or basher by any means. I actually kind of like that it enforces a little bit more build variety and creativity, but what I don't love is that there's all these designs around it that are so explicit, such as the amp system, where that's included on the Gala Adventure Mana Spirals. Now they're throwing it onto this banner. I don't want to see every banner from now on just be an amp banner, basically. And for that reason, I actually feel like I might skip, just because I don't want to participate in the amp system. I think it's kind of an obtuse mechanic, and it just doesn't sit well with me. Something about it just doesn't feel right to me, so that's actually kind of why I might skip on this banner. I really like Humanoid Mercury, but I don't know. I don't know about this amp nihility business. And this is probably just old man Foundry yelling at clouds, because back in our day, we had the energy mechanic, and it got like a proper teaser video to explain how it worked. And now with amps, it feels like it's just been dumped on us and relegated to the footnotes of the game and was never explained at all. But so it goes. So that's kind of my take on this banner. I think Humanoid Mercury is very, very strong, but I still may not summon, and that's just where I'm at right now with this showcase. I'm not too worried about myself personally, because I believe that I have the facilities, the gear, the collection that I can brute force my way through whatever Sinister Dominion. If I want to bring Karina and Mitsuba and Alisan to Master Lilith, I can definitely clear that content with those units, no problem. So I just feel like in my position, I have the luxury to skip something like this. My worry is that for a lot of players, if they're not participating in these new amp mechanics and new workaround mechanics for the Curse of Nihility, are they going to be left in the dust for future Sinister Dominion bosses? And I hope that's not the case, but I'm a little bit apprehensive right now. So that's kind of where I'm at with all of that. Poseidon came out today. Now all of a sudden Poseidon causes Curse of Nihility. I thought that that was Thor's thing, but I guess not. Anyway, let's move on from that discussion, that sidebar, to actually talk about the Summon Showcase. We've got Humanoid Mercury, we've got Child Ranzal, and we've got Gala Laxi. We're going to go through each of their kits. Remember, the showcase lasts about 5 days or so, and you can wait until the end to make a decision, since you may want to see what the next banner is going to look like. Humanoid Mercury, I think she looks fantastic in her human form. Love the portrait, love the inclusion of the Great Worm variant of her in the background there. The way that her skills work are Raging Ocean, her first skill, deals damage, causes frostbite, and if the user has a team strength amp, a more powerful version is used. You also get some dragon gauge increase, and that increases if you have the team strength amp. So at base, you're dealing an okay amount of damage, but for the skill energy cost on a dagger, not really a good amount of damage. And you get 4% of your dragon gauge. When modified, when you have that team strength amp, it's actually really good. 2400% for only 2800 skill energy is a really good amount of damage for that cost. You get the frostbite, you get 5% dragon energy. So I think that Humanoid Mercury is going to be really at her best with that team strength amp, and at that point, she's dealing very respectable damage off of Raging Ocean. Aquatic Ruin is the way that she builds up her amp. So that deals damage to enemies directly ahead, grants the user a strength amp, and if the user has already shapeshifted at least once, you get a more powerful version of the skill. That upgrades the skill from 6 hits, which does okay damage, to 9 hits, which ends up doing pretty good damage for that SP cost. It's similar to how Gala Mim's second skill does more damage after she's already shapeshifted, so that's pretty good. And as far as how the strength amps work, if you're not too familiar with the system, let's go ahead and look at it together now just so we can kind of walk through it. It's here in Help Support. You have to click on Help, you have to click on Special Effects, and then there's essentially 2 pages about amps. One about amps, and then one about amp types and effects. So the long and short of this amps portion is that, well, it's honestly easier just to look at amp types and effects, so let's do that. Basically, when you get a strength amp, you start off by getting a level 1 amp, and if you use the skill that gives you an amp within the duration of the first amp, it levels up, essentially. So it levels up from 1 to 2, and then from a level 2 personal, it levels up into a level 1 team variety. And then you only have 30 seconds to advance it again. If you do so, you get to a level 2 team variety, and that's sort of the final iteration for a character like Mercury who has a level 2 team maximum. So essentially, the first time you use Mercury's second skill, you're getting a 3% personal strength buff, which is not a lot. The second time, that's going to upgrade to a 5% personal strength buff. It does last 60 seconds, which gives you a good window to charge up the skill again to get the level up. And if you are able to level up from level 2, then it gets upgraded to the team variety. That's a team-wide 20% strength, but only for 30 seconds. It is a good strength buff. It applies to the entire team, but now you only have a 30-second window to cast Mercury's second skill another time and advance it to the level 2 team buff, and then you're going to need to use it within that 30-second duration to keep it at level 2, where you get a team-wide 40% strength, which is okay. I mean, I don't want to over-exaggerate on this because our Agito weapons are giving us like a comparable amount of personal strength buffs, but obviously with those not working in Curse of Nihility, all of a sudden when you have no strength buffs, a 40% strength buff starts to look good. In other content, you're capping the 200% strength buff bracket already, a lot of times with Patia, Templar Hope, or Dragon's Claws characters. So in normal game modes, this is not a good buff, but because of the constraints of Curse of Nihility, this becomes a respectable buff that you have to work very hard to get. That's my take on amps. Hopefully that explanation makes sense. Let's move back to Mercury's kit and talk about her abilities. Starting with her co-ability and chain co-ability. Her co-ability is just critical rate 10%, which is standard on daggers. A little bit unfortunate that you use the dagger just because there are good water daggers already. There's actually a lot of different water daggers, and Tiki comes to mind as a really good one right now for master difficulty of Lilith's Encroaching Shadow. So it's fine, you can use a high dragon weapon or something. It's not like the Agito weapon does anything except for have better stats thanks to Curse of Nihility. So you can make it work. You can use an off-element weapon, have both of them on the same team. They don't have the same co-ability, but it is something to consider, just making sure that you have equipment for both of them. Chain co-ability, water team strength amp equals burn res 100%. If a team member is attuned to water, it reduces their susceptibility to burning by 100% when they have a team strength amp. Remember, this is a little bit confusing, but this applies amps to the user, including the team strength amp. But there are some There's some weirdness with different characters having different maximum levels that I don't want to get into, but I think that functionally this is going to be 100% burn res on Mercury herself until we start to see more amp characters like Gala Laxi, but Gala Laxi already has dual resistances. So that's my reading of this, but please let me know if you read otherwise from this. I think that functionally, when you get to the team strength amp stage, what this is effectively going to do is mean that Mercury has 100% stun res as well as 100% burn res. As for her other abilities, Waterworm's Nature 2 gives her 100% bog res, which is very flavorful, so I have to give it that. It's similar to how Mim can't be burnt, well, Mercury can't be bogged, and gives her 14% to the modifier applied to damage when in dragon form. When shapeshifting the first time, she's always going to become Mercury. The second time, she's always going to become High Mercury. Little sad that Humanoid Mids did not get the same treatment with his High Dragon form, but he is a welfare adventurer, so that's probably why. Maybe he'll get an alt one day, maybe even a Gala alt. That'd be super sweet. So I expect these dragon forms to have good damage modifiers, possibly a bog-inducing skill as well. Her abilities otherwise are stun res 100%, which is good against Lilith, may not be good against future Sinister Dominion bosses that start with a fight against a flame element foe. Perhaps they're going to stagger it, so the first half boss fight does burn, whereas the second half boss fight, which is Lilith for the water element adventurers, does stun. But either way, Mercury is probably going to be covered for the most part. And then finally, Bubble Shield 2 grants the user the Spear of Protection effect when they have a team strength amp. Spear of Protection gradually recovers the user's HP and grants a one-use shield that nullifies damage up to 30% of the user's maximum HP. The shield can stack with ordinary shields, but it itself does not stack, and its effects are lost upon taking damage, or if the user no longer has a team strength amp, and after it's been lost, you can't activate it again for 10 seconds. 10 seconds is actually a pretty generous cooldown on this, so as long as you're able to use your second skill often enough that you have good uptime on your team strength amp, this is actually pretty nice because there are global AoEs in both Lilith and Ayaha and Detoha that this will probably be able to block. So I'm thinking of Accursed Shackles against Lilith. This will probably be enough to block that a lot of the time, and against Ayaha and Detoha they do a global purple AoE that you can't avoid. You could dragon tank it or something, but you can't actually avoid it. This could possibly block that, and you're getting some passive regen along the way. Both this shield and the regen are not affected by Nihility notably, and overall, I just think that Humanoid Mercury is going to be really strong. I don't know if she's going to be able to get the level 2 team amp all the time, but the level 1 seems eminently attainable to me, and then you get more damage on your Raging Ocean, which is fantastic. Then you get your Bubble Shield protection, which is nice, your dual resistances. I feel like she's going to be a very good adventurer, so that's my opinion on Humanoid Mercury. I'm very tempted, but I'm going to try, resist, and save, I think. As for Child Ranzal here, well, Child Ranzal also uses the amp mechanics, but he's a little bit different here. So Swing for the Fences, his first skill, does damage and causes Scorch Rend. Not a lot of damage, 1,015 for this skill entry cost is not very high. Scorch Rend is okay, but there's a reason I think the base damage on that is low, and that's Grand Slam. Grants the user a strength amp, and immediately readies Swing for the Fences for use. The next time Swing for the Fences is used, it will deal critical damage. This critical hit will reset the user's inspiration level if the user is inspired. So as a little bit of an event here, I feel like this could have just inspired Ranzal, but knowing that inspiration doesn't work with Nihility, they instead chose to word it that the next time it's used, it does critical damage. Like, that is essentially what inspiration does. Obviously, shared skills or dragon skills could be a little bit of a shenanigan that you could get up to otherwise, but like, this just feels silly to me. Like, it does critical damage, and if you just so happen to be inspired in the flame element, which is not all that common, then you're no longer inspired. So effectively taking up your inspiration stacks either way. So I don't love that. It feels, again, just very arbitrary, but this is actually pretty nice, making it so that Swing for the Fences does guaranteed critical damage. Critical damage is a 1.7 times modifier on this base damage, and in Ranzal's case, it actually is a little bit better because he has some built-in additional critical damage. So the fact that he's also getting strength amps, which start off personal and eventually will become team, is good. Axes are not the best at SP generation, so that is a little bit of a concern as to the uptime of him being able to maintain a team strength amp on his own. So that's something I'd be a little bit wary of here with Ranzal, but otherwise this seems like a pretty potent combination, causing Scorch Rend. His core ability is defense 15%, standard for axes, and then he has team strength amp equals strength plus 8% as his chain code ability, which is likely to eventually give him the 8% strength bump once he gets to the team strength amp level 1 and then level 2 as well. So Power Hitter 2, his first ability, adds 40% to the modifier applied to critical damage, but prevents the user's critical rate from being increased by more than 10%. So good and bad here. It's going to mean that Ranzal probably does a significant amount of his damage through his skill, through Swing for the Fences, via the fact that it automatically becomes critical, because you're not going to be able to utilize critical rate Wormprints on him as a way of just increasing his passive critical damage on his basic attacks or in dragon form or anything like that. So that's not great. Don't put Horus on him. That'd be a really bad dragon for him, probably. Although maybe you could make the team strength amp component work a little better with all that attack rate, but I digress. Anyway, you do get the 40% modifier to critical damage, which is pretty good. It's more damage. It turns that 1.7 times mod of critical rate into a 2.1 times, and then that's before your chain or your regular co-ability rather, on Halloween Mim, and any Wormprints that you have that increase critical damage further. So that's pretty good. Could also work well with Arctos potentially, but I sort of doubt that Mars would beat out, or that Arctos would beat out Mars, just because raw strength bracket tends to be pretty good itself. And then moving on here, this doesn't affect inspiration, so that's one thing. And then grants the user a strength amp with a maximum team amp level of 2 when the Swing for the Fences skill deals critical damage. After activating, this ability will not activate again for 1 second. Aha, so that's actually kind of cool. So Grand Slam gives you a strength amp. It makes it so this Swing for the Fences is ready and will deal critical damage. And then this ability gives you a strength amp when that does critical damage. So essentially, every time you use Grand Slam, you're actually getting 2 strength amps off of it. And then if you have something like Summer Cleo shared skill on Ranzal and you're doing Swing for the Fences more often, I guess that's actually a bad example because he can't have a high critical rate inherently, so it has to actually deal critical damage, so that's probably not a good way of getting more strength amps. But either way, you're now getting 2 strength amps at once, which is actually pretty respectable. So it may be a little easier for Ranzal, even though he's an axe, to ramp up the amps and actually get some of those personal strength amps into team amps up to level 2, which is his maximum. Stun res 100%, and then strength amp equals attack rate plus 8%. He's going to have a strength amp, I think. Within 60 seconds, you're surely going to be able to get enough SP to cast Grand Slam, and then by doing so, you get 2 amps. So this is actually pretty cohesive. It's actually more cohesive than I thought at first glance here. Maybe a little bit better adventure than I would have anticipated. I definitely saw Humanoid Mercury as the best adventure on the showcase. I will say that the thought of finally getting to use Ranzal against Volk is also something that excites me here, because Ranzal has not had a flame ult that actually can be used against Legend Volk. But I don't want to give in just yet, but I'm very tempted on the showcase. And finally, that brings us to Gala Laxi. So I'll kind of skim over her since she's an existing adventurer, but Gala Laxi's first skill, Code 14 Conviction, deals damage to enemies directly ahead. If it's used in Eden mode, you get the Code 5 variant instead, which inflicts burn. She has unique combos which have almost a rhythm to her cadence with those. She's not a character that I've played a lot of, so I don't have a lot of unique insight to give on Gala Laxi, but I can attest to her as an AI. With her being a melee AI that stands at range, that fits into a lot of compositions really comfortably. It's not a Nadine level where she also provides the utility of a survival coab and Dispel, but she does stand at a distance, which anytime you're playing against Volk will make phase 1 a lot more comfortable. So that is one thing I've used her for sure. But I don't think her burn uptime is going to be especially good unless you're managing her yourself. Eden mode gives her the Fig effect and activates Eden mode. This is an effect that I would assume is Nihility proof, but I stand to be corrected if that's wrong. Like, this reads to me as a personal unique effect, and yet Ilya's charges don't work, so here we are. Fig will automatically attack foes. This automatic damage will not be treated as skill damage. If it's used during Eden mode, you get Eden code 1 instead to deal damage directly ahead. Fig lasts 20 seconds. Standard attack damage is actually one of the cool things about Gala Laxi here, and it pairs okay with dragon-centric adventurers who are going to be doing a lot of damage through their basic attacks. In the future, if we get some more close-range mana casters like Yoshitsune, maybe if they're in the flame element, they'll also kind of have the same niche where their basic attacks are the way that they deal most of their damage, in which case this could be a good co-ability to have. Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of too many flame adventurers in that sort of category that do basic attack damage. There are several that do 4-strike damage, like Monster Hunter Berserker or Gala Leonidas, but notably 4 strikes are not considered standard attacks, so you would need Grace's co-ability to power those up. This just powers up your auto taps, whether you're in human or dragon form. Chain co-ability gives you a little bit of extra wind res. Abilities here, Resonant Hearts 2 gives you a gauge with 3 bars. It fills when standard attacks, 4 strikes, and dash attacks are used, and grants cumulative buffs to Laxi based on the number of bars filled. So I also think that this should work despite Curse of Nihility, but I could be wrong on that. I think that these are invisible buffs, if I remember. But thinking about this, if Gala Laxi gets a Mana Spiral, she'll probably have some amps and stuff anyway, so she'll be good. Mana Kiln 2, Stun and Sleep 100%, which is good. Critical Rate Frenzy 2, increases critical rate 4% for every 15 hit combo and adds 4% to the modifier applied to critical damage each time one of the users is a critical hit. That should not work with Nihility, so this is going to get canceled out basically. Maybe she'll get critical amps instead in the future. Alright everyone, I think that is going to do it for this video. So that's my take on the showcase. It honestly looks really strong. Maybe I'm just resistant to change. Maybe I should summon on this. I would love your opinions in the comments below because I'm very torn. But that is going to do it for today everyone. Let me know what you think about this banner. Otherwise, thank you as always for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.